Hello, and welcome back. Today we are indeed looking over episode 2 of season 2 of TSUKIMICHI Moonlit Fantasy, and yes, I do realize I am a couple days late on this episode 2 review. But, well, the year has not started in the best way possible, very sadly, so we are delayed. Be sure, though, that I am planning on fully diving into this season moving forward as of this week. Now, episode 2 of season 2 of Tsukimichi here, it was not exactly what I expected. I did see many people feeling like this was some sort of filler episode, and while I disagree with that, I can understand why they would say so, because we didn't progress the story at all in this episode. We just had the entire episode basically giving the prologue to how these other two heroes got to this world and what sort of people they are and their parties, very generally, very bare bones like, and on a very fundamental level. We didn't get any in-depth, let's say, showcase of how these people actually are, what sort of people they are. But we did get a very basic outlook, which is good enough to start with, as I am sure they are planning on doing way more with them down the line after this initial introduction, as of course they are, in my view, planning on introducing them a lot more in the current story in season 2 with Makoto and the rest of the crew. So let's just go over the heroes slightly quickly here. We meet the first one, the female, which I just am calling Mary Sue because she basically is a Mary Sue. She can do everything, doesn't struggle with anything, and doesn't really have a fulfilling life back in Japan. Also, coincidentally enough, both of these heroes are from the same school Makoto is, question mark? At least the girl. So she isn't really fulfilled. She just doesn't really have any challenges in life. But the goddess then zips her up to the isekai world there, offers her a challenge, offers her a life filled with difficulty and struggles, which she accepts. Now, same with the boy, who is a model for some reason. Don't really get to know much about her, or him, for that matter. Both of them, we don't really get to know much about, just that they are school age and some very basic character traits. Anyhow, this guy is a male model, which I suppose is hard enough, and he gets bullied in school and is not really one to stand up for himself. Bit of a coward, perhaps, having some character defects in that area. When he gets offered the hero position by the goddess, he basically seems to demand way more than is common, and also he wants to change his look, because I assume he has some sort of complexes about his own look based on his modeling past in the real world, question mark? Not quite sure about that one. But anyhow, both of them end up being sent to the isekai world, being heroes, both of them, and then them being sent to two different nations, which are both powerful, and in this case, both allied to defeat the demon Scourge that has invaded their land. Because apparently, in an exposition dump that we get this episode, we find out that this isekai world is basically exactly like Japan, geography-wise, and in this identical, at least geographically speaking, country or area to Japan, the demons were banished initially to the far east by the goddess, but now they have encroached on the, let's say, space of men and already taken over and destroyed one human nation, and now it's only these two nations that stand between the demon kingdom, I suppose, and the rest of the human settlements or human countries to the west of them that are not as powerful as themselves, being the Limia and Gritonia kingdom and empire, respectively. Now, I did appreciate getting all this information about the world and getting some slight world building, as we haven't really gotten any info previously as to how exactly this world is and all the geopolitics, as we have just followed Makoto and his adventures in Season 1 and didn't really get much of a feel for all of that, just some slight hints here and there. And while I think the anime did a very lackluster job of introducing both of these heroes, I will give it some slack in terms of, yes, it is only one episode, you have maybe max 20 minutes of runtime, and in those 20 minutes you are supposed to introduce two brand new characters and their parties from scratch, so you get like 10-ish minutes max per character to introduce them and have some sort of, let's say, starting arc to set them on. And I can empathize how that is difficult. But anyhow, I think they could have done one episode each to introduce each of the heroes. But of course, again, I understand the restriction they have in terms of runtime, and that this might have been the best way for them to include some backstory for them before moving further into the story this season. Now, with the female hero, she forms her party, very standard stuff, and it seems that what they wanted to do with her was they wanted to set her on a specific sort of arc, because, as I said earlier, she was basically Mary Sue in the real world. She never had any issues she couldn't overcome, she never had any real difficulties to deal with in life, and they wanted to really humble her and set her on a different path in this new world. And what they were trying to do, which I would say they failed at, but what they were trying to do is that in this first conflict, when she is faced with killing demons for the first time to save this priestess that came to join her party, she hesitates. She doesn't kill this goblin, whatever it is, immediately, because, understandably, she hasn't killed anything before, and it calls for help, or it begs for mercy, which of course any normal human being would generally hesitate at that, especially someone like her being from a background such as she has. And of course, this hesitation means that he calls for backup, which means that the party and this priestess gets practically overrun immediately. Now, what they were trying to do here, what they were trying to build out here, is the story arc of her hesitation, her unwillingness to, let's say, do what was necessary to kill this demon creature immediately, letting him call for backup, caused pain and death and suffering, and then that allowing her to vow to herself, dedicate herself to never making the same mistake again. But to have that story arc, you have to actually let it develop. And what they did here is that instead of having, let's say, the priestess be overrun and killed, so her having that death on her conscience, and let's say her whole party almost being wiped out, and using that as the foundation of this character arc and the setup for this character arc. Instead, they didn't do any of that. She just immediately, in the span of 10 seconds, decided that, no, I'm not going to hesitate. I'm not going to let this be the end. I'm not going to let my bad choice have such a bad consequence. And then she rushes in, using some hero-like abilities, and saves everyone. Or at least does enough so that no one gets too seriously injured and the priestess survives. Now again, I do generally like the character arc they were trying to set up here, but since they resolved it, like they set this up and they resolved it in a span of under 30 seconds, that doesn't have any impact. Like, you don't get any feeling of, oof, this girl just had a really tough time and the thing that happened to her is rough, right? You don't get any sense of empathy with her or understanding her situation or feeling with her situation because they didn't let this arc develop at all. You can't have a setup and a resolution to a character arc in under a minute. That's not how things work. That's not how you write anything like that, you know? What they should have done, in my opinion, as I said, is let's say the priestess die. This pure, kind, young girl die, and then let her really reel from that. Let her really feel ashamed and angry and sad and impacted by that on a deep level. And then, as well, maybe have her party be heavily hurt but survive. And her using that as a solemn vow to herself that I will never let anything like that happen again. I will never hesitate again. And using that as the background for her being ruthless and unhesitatingly, destroying all opposition because of this thing that happened. But again, didn't happen, no impact, so never mind. Could have been a good arc, but whatever. Furthermore, what they do with her before they switch over to the other hero is that they have them fight Mio, and not in her human form, but in the spider of disaster form before she meets Makoto. And with her and her whole party being severely hurt and her having her first defeat. This was also very unsatisfying for me because the fight felt very simple and quick. It didn't really feel to have any impact for me. Like, I felt like this is supposed to be a somber moment. Like, this is supposed to be her first time in her life, both in the real world and in the isekai world, where she has ever failed at something, where she has ever not succeeded at doing something and had been beaten down and defeated. But even though they try to go for that, because of the restriction of runtime, I suppose, it all feels really rushed, it all feels really quick and simple, and again, I don't get any sense of connection to what they are trying to tell. I don't get any sense of empathy to the story they are trying to convey here. If they would have actually had the time, they could have had a fight last longer, really showcase how difficult and hard this fight was, and really take the time to let despair and an utter sense of defeat creep in to our hero, and then spend some time after to show her, like they were trying to do, getting back up, getting back on the saddle, and vowing to, not be defeated again, or using this taste of defeat to strengthen her in the future. They tried to do that, but again, same with the hesitation arc, let's say. They did it all in a minute flat, basically, which leaves it with no impact and it just feeling very hollow. Anyhow, though, they tried, but it could have been done much, much better. Then, jumping over to the male hero, the former male model, he changes his look, gets sent into the Gritonia Empire, whatever it's supposed to be called, and he gets a lot of abilities from the goddess because he basically demands some more abilities to be all-powerful, because I guess he just wants to. So he's immortal at night, and he has this magic eye, which is what they spend most of the time on in this episode, of showing him with this magic eye, basically charming everyone who comes into contact with him. And of course, in this case, it all being women. And how he maybe at first doesn't think it's a bad thing, but comes to realize that, wow, this magic eye that I've gotten, while it makes everyone love me and everyone just wants to jump into bed with me, basically, it doesn't allow me to actually form any real relationships. It makes everything superficial and everything fake. At least that's what they were trying to convey, I feel like, with this character, with this male hero. But again, it being very short and limited in the amount they were able to tell. I do think that can be an interesting setup for later, like how his magic eye might make his party, let's say, follow him and obey him and whatnot, but how it all might be, let's say, a fake party in terms of none of them actually having any real connection to him or any real trust in him. They all just follow him because of his, let's say, magical charm over them. I do doubt they will actually do much with that moving forward, but I think it could be interesting, the story beats they can create with that initial setup. Outside of the party and his magic eye and his personality, we get to know the princess a bit of this Gritonia Empire, which I suppose is also the ruler of the empire, at least sounds like it, looks like it. She finds out that he has this magic eye and wants this court mage or whatnot take care of the problem so that she and the royal family is not affected. And she also apparently doesn't buy his whole innocent act and thinks he is more of a calculating, potentially scheming, not moral guy, which I suppose makes sense because she thinks that he is using the magic eye for his own benefit, even though she does say that she thinks he can't control it yet at the end of the episode. We also see her ending up kissing him and sleeping with him at the end of the episode, which makes me question and think, okay, what is this princess doing? She says something at the end of the episode in bed that she is willing to do anything to take care of the demon threat, which sounds kind of rough if she is saying it like, yeah, I'll do anything, even this, in this case, this meaning sleeping with the new hero. But why is she so motivated? Why is she so determined? She says she owes it to her mother, but why exactly? Don't know. But this whole princess person, this character we get introduced to, she is somewhat interesting in principle, and I am somewhat interested to see what they do with her for the rest of the season, if anything. But at least it seems to me that she will have a decent impact and relevance for at least the male hero's journey as we move things forward. Now, what I would really like to see in episodes coming down the line for Season 2 is, for example, seeing the two heroes and seeing them in how they handled and how they saw the ending fight of Season 1, where Makoto basically nuked the entire demon and human army. I would love to see how these two heroes, which I'm pretty sure were there at the battle, right? I want to see how they saw this, like what their points of view were and how they reacted to this. I think that would be a very fun thing to show, and it would be good to somewhat show us how they view Makoto, or how they view this being, which of course eventually will be revealed to be Makoto, and building on that before an eventual introduction between Makoto and these two heroes. Anyhow though, this episode, it wasn't the best, but it did serve as an adequate prequel introduction to our two heroes, which I'm sure will be important moving further down the line of Season 2. I'm looking forward to the next episode, which will hopefully go back to the present and showing Makoto and his shenanigans. With all that being said, what did you think of this episode? Like it, hate it, leave all those comments and thoughts down below. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Deeply appreciate any and all support. I am planning to make daily videos, as I have been planning for the last 2 months, Sadly, things have been very rough IRL, and things have had to take priority, but I am hoping and planning to really dive into this season, this winter 2024 anime season, right about now, and really get things rolling. Though that being said, I hope you had a good time watching this video, hope you learned something new, and I will see you all next time. So bye-bye.